Those are the elements of the Constitution Amendment Bill 7. Seating arrangements, introduction of partially a new voting system, increased representation of vulnerable or rather historically underrepresented groups like women, youth, and people with disabilities. But at the same time, there's concerns about these nice aspects of representation and inclusivity washed as a sort of Trojan horse for what would otherwise be gerrymandering and power grab by the ruling party.
Welcome to the Africa for Dummies podcast, where we keep all things Africa. And today on the Africa for Dummies podcast, we are going to be discussing the Zambia proposed constitutional amendment, what it really changes, who it affects, and what it could cost. In order to do this, we have a professional, Mr. Zenge, who's always ready to break down what these things mean for us and how they could potentially affect us. So Zenge, take it away.
Yeah, so this bill is famously known as Bill 7. It's a quite significant bill, and historically we have seen various attempts at constitutional amendments. But just to dig down into the core aspects of what this bill has, it's one is the core changes of the seating in terms of the National Assembly, our parliament, and then the new voting system, reserved seats for people that are normally underrepresented. And then there's also other major changes with regards to term limits, and then there's also the financial aspect. So when we look at the core change, there's an increase in the National Assembly seats from 156 to 211, which is a massive jump, putting 55 new members of parliament. Then there's also a new voting system, which also introduces proportional representation, PR, for example. And this is going to apply to 35 seats, which will be inclusive in that 55 number. And these seats are for people that are generally underrepresented in our systems, in the electoral voting systems. Right now, we have 25 out of 156 members of parliament are female, so around 15%. And this change in terms of reserved seats is supposed to take care of that, the lack of representation of people like women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Women get 20 seats, youth get 12, persons with disabilities get 3. So this is an additional 35 seats to the Zambian parliament, and that will be under the proportional representation. And then other changes include removing term limits on local government elected officials like mayors or district chairpersons in rural areas. And then there's also other aspects of by-elections. A by-election, by the way, is an election that is triggered in an extraordinary time, not during a general scheduled election. Well, let's sort of zone into the history. First, the history of constitutional evolution in Zambia, and then I'll go into explaining what exactly proportional representation is, because this will be the first time that Zambia will be using this system that is used in South Africa, is used in Germany, and other parts of the world. So, historically, Zambia got independence in 1964 under a new constitution, the Independence Constitution, and established parliamentary democracy. Powers basically shared between the president and then a Westminster-style parliament. Westminster, of course, because we got independent from the United Kingdom. And then in 1973, things changed. Zambia decided to have a one-party state, although it was officially called one-party participatory democracy. But it was more or less a one-party state where the party ruled the day, and the challenges were within the party rather than different political parties. 1991 came, Zambia came back to democracy, the multi-party politics came back, and the movement for multi-party democracy, MMD party, came to power. And after that, in 1996, Zambia had a constitutional amendment which was very controversial and considered very partisan because it included a parental clause, basically requiring that anyone who wants to stand for president of Zambia has to have 2 parents born in Zambia. This was considered partisan because the main challenger at that time, the predecessor to the president of the time was Frederick Chiluba. His predecessor was Kenneth Kaunda. Kenneth Kaunda had both parents born outside Zambia in Malawi. So it was seen as a way to disqualify a key opponent. That's one. And then now there's then there's the latest massive constitutional change was in 2016 January, which was signed by President Edgar Lungu. The amendment included the 50% plus one clause in terms of the threshold required to win an election in the first round of presidency. So 50% plus one basically means you just get anything more than 50% of the vote. Before that, it was, and I explain this in the voting systems. Before that was first past the post, which I'll explain. But other aspects of the amendment in the 2016 amendment were also running mate as a vice president. So both vice president and president stand on the same ticket, same requirements, same succession plan, and then also the abolition of deputy ministers because of budget expenses, which Nathan will go into actually when it comes to the economics of all of these political seats. Now we come to 2016. 2016 also included a referendum. The referendum was on expanding the Bill of Rights. That failed through because there's just not enough of a vote threshold to require success in that referendum in the August 2016 election. So major changes happened in 2016. Both the massive constitutional changes on the presidency and then also an attempt to change the Bill of Rights, which failed. Then there was Bill 10. Bill 10 happened between 2019 and 2020, and it faced massive opposition from both political parties, including the current party that's now in power, the United Party for National Development, and the president, Hakainde Hichilema, but also civil society groups like Oasis Forum. Bill 10 included various proposals, most controversially the increase of cabinet powers and cabinet approval of debt at a time when Zambia was highly indebted, and removing those powers from parliament, among others. 2025 comes and we have the Bill 7. And Bill 7 has gone through a pretty bumpy road. The first draft was pushed in March, and the bill was publicized in May, and it went for a reading, and then the court intervened in June 2025 and told it to, basically they deferred it. Deferring is when you take it out, reconsider, revise. So the grounds for that was that there was not enough public consultation. So the president made a technical committee of about 25 people, and they went to all the 10 provinces to have consultative processes with citizens. Some made some very strange recommendations and said they should include a 7-year term for the president, and that never made it through. It was just a bit strange. So, and then Oasis Forum. Oasis Forum is one of the biggest mother bodies of civil society in Zambia. They were very clear that they wanted to completely withdrawn. They didn't want any amendments, any revisions. They said, nope, not now, not less than 1 year before the next election in August 2026. And then the report, the technical committee came back and they fully endorsed it. They said they made a few changes here and there, but nothing too significant. And they fully endorsed it back at State House. So it was almost like the president saying, oh, see now, Oasis Forum doesn't like me, but guess what? The technical committee came back after 10 province tour and they say it's just fine. So they put it back into parliament on the 3rd of December 2025. And a petition has now been filed by petitioners Munia Zulu, former member of parliament, and Celestine Mukandila, and filed a constitutional court saying that the parliamentarians that are in parliament have been contempting, how do you pronounce this? Contempt of court, basically. They don't feel like it has got the due consultations that's required. They allege that the technical committee is biased and political and so on. So that's going to be interesting to see. But there's still a lot of distrust and controversy. Some people are calling for protest, some people are not calling for protest, but this is going to be very interesting, and it's very clear that election season has started. So going to proportional representation, how exactly does this work out? Proportional representation is a system where the vote count is more reflected in the seats that are allocated. So the current system in Zambia is the first past the post system. The first past the post system is a system where anyone who gets a plurality, anyone who gets the most amount of votes, this could be literally 40 votes out of 100, and you'd basically win and take the entire parliamentary seat. But in a situation where there is a proportional representation, if let's say we're looking at a basic number of 100 votes, right? And you have a threshold. You vote for a political party, by the way. So you don't vote for a particular individual. If you have 100 votes and you have party A, B, C, right? So A gets a certain amount of votes above the threshold. B gets a certain amount of votes above the threshold. and C doesn't get a certain amount of votes above the threshold. So A and B will get the allocation of votes. So this threshold could be less than 10%. If you get less than 10%, this would be you want your party won't have a seat in parliament. So, for example, imagine 100 people vote for parties in a PR system, and we have 20 PR seats to fill, right? Seats are 20, voters are 100. And then the results share. Let's say UPND gets 55 votes, yeah? So they'll get 55%. PF gets 30 votes, they get 30%. Socialist Party or Citizens First, whichever one you want, gets 9 votes, right? 9%. Rainbow Party gets 6 votes, 6%. And then the threshold is 10%. Only the UPND and PF will get this threshold, will meet this threshold, which means the UPND will get 55% of 20 seats, 11 seats. The PF will get 30% of 20 seats, 6 seats. And the Socialist Party, Rainbow Party, Citizen Party, whoever, gets 0 seats because they fell under 10%. The 3 remaining seats that would have gone to the smaller parties are all redistributed among the PF and the UPND, bringing their final results to 13 seats for the UPND and 7 seats for the PF. That's basically how it would work in the proposed system in Zambia. So the total number of seats that are subject to this are 35. Only 35. It's not 211, it's only 35. And these seats are such that you are only voting for the party, and the party will just put a woman, will put a youth, will put a person with disabilities to fill that seat. Yeah. So what it means is 211 seats in total, elected first past the post in your local area. For example, UPND might win 120 of these seats. PF wins 85, and Independents win 6. This is just random numbers. Yeah, so it's really about getting a larger share of a larger reflection of the actual vote in the in a particular area or seat. But in this case, it's a seat to promote some kind of inclusion. But at the same time, people also are worried about the other seats, constituency seats, which are subject to a delimitation report. A delimitation report is basically outlines the boundaries of constituencies and wards, which are political maps and boundaries that determine, based on the population of voters, determine how and who will be represented. So, and the number of people per representative. And the Electoral Commission of Zambia has a lot of powers in that. And that's one of the criticisms that people have, that this is a lot of discretion. Electoral Commission of Zambia is appointed by, allegedly, or it's criticized to be appointed by people that are highly affiliated with the ruling party, and therefore result in gerrymandering. What is gerrymandering? Gerrymandering is when you break up areas and make boundaries to increase and inflate the number of constituencies and therefore representatives in parliament to the favor of the party of the day at that time. So if Nathan knows that if there's 100 seats, right, and Nathan knows that by cutting up, maybe adding 5, breaking up 10 areas of his and cutting 5 up of them or anything, it will increase the number of seats for Nathan, knowing very well that he's more likely to win in that area. And he'll probably not change anything about my side of the voting pattern, because if he was to apply the same rule and increase seats on his side, increase seats on my side, both of us will end up increasing our representation. So it's about inflating areas that you are likely to win. That's what gerrymandering is. It's a bit of political trickery. And that the important thing here is, if that does happen, that means the UPND will have a lot of power to pass a lot of laws that they want to pass. And it can affect you from anything from budgets to tax. And some people, although I don't fully believe this because it's never really been successful, and I don't think a Zambian president should do it, is calling for a 3rd term, which Sishua has spoken about. I don't know if he has a lot of support in that, but it's something that happens when you have a political party that has almost unchecked power. And that could happen if you have an excessive case of gerrymandering. So yeah, in short, those are the elements of the Constitution Amendment Bill 7. Seating arrangements, introduction of partially a new voting system, increased representation of vulnerable or rather historically underrepresented groups like women, youth, and people with disabilities. But at the same time, there's concerns about these nice aspects of representation and inclusivity as a sort of Trojan horse for what would otherwise be gerrymandering and power grab by the ruling party. All of this has economic implications because Zambia is a country that's going to enormous debt, and we're talking about increasing seats for politicians. What do you say, Nathan, on the economic aspect of these changes or the economic ramifications?
Right. As you rightfully said, Zambia is under a lot of debt pressure right now, and Zambia runs at budget deficits, which means a budget deficit essentially means that the government spends more money than it collects. In 2024 alone, the deficit was about negative 3.3% of GDP. Over the last 10 years, Zambia has often run deficits between 5 and 13% of GDP. Now, having a deficit on its own is not always a bad thing. Sometimes countries borrow to build roads, hospitals, or power stations. In Zambia's case, the recent reduction in the deficit is actually a good sign. It shows tighter control of spending and continued debt payments under the IMF program. The real issue is not just having a deficit, the issue is how much room is left to spend after debt payments are done. Now, let's zoom into Parliament because we're talking about the bill here. Parliament's annual budget for 2024 is about almost a billion kwacha. This pays for MP salaries, allowances, offices, staff, vehicles, buildings, daily operations. If the proposed bill expands Parliament by adding more elected and reserved seats, that automatically increases the wage bill, allowances, constituency support, vehicles, staff, and long-term pension costs. Now, the thing is, these are not once-off expenses. Once created, they become permanent yearly costs. At the same time, the Electoral Commission estimates that just one parliamentary by-election costs around 5 million kwacha. If 9 seats are contested at once, that's about 45 million kwacha. That's money that could go to funding clinics, schools, or drought relief. Now let's zoom into the national budget. The 2026 national budget is projected at 253 billion kwacha. That money comes from taxes, domestic revenue, and also grants as well as borrowing. And the borrowing is split into borrowing from local institutions as well as from outside the country. Now, the government the finance minister was speaking here, is actually targeting a deficit of about 2.1 to 3.7% GDP, depending on how the budget performs. To raise money, the government says it does not want to overtax formal workers. Instead, the plan is to widen the tax net, meaning more people and businesses are going to be contributing small amounts to the taxes. Now, some of these key revenue measures, or the way that they're going to increase this tax net, is by higher tax thresholds for small businesses, tax incentives for local manufacturing and for dairy, as well as higher levies on mobile money, toll fees, and some licenses. Government hasn't given one exact figure for how much all these changes would raise, but the idea is to collect more money from small businesses, mining, manufacturing, digital transactions, and everyday consumption. Now, place that next to spending pressures. Over 36% of the 2026 budget is going to go to debt payments and basic running of the government. That is nearly the same amount going to all major social services combined. At the same time, about 60% of Zambians are still living in poverty. The health sector has a funding gap of about 21 billion kwacha. Nutrition gets less than 0.02% of the full budget, and social protection funding has slightly dropped. So here's the big economic question in simple terms. As government tries to collect more revenue and control debt, can Zambia afford to permanently increase political costs without putting extra pressure on debt, public services, and household incomes? Now, that was just me giving the numbers. I would like to hear what you guys think. Please comment down below in the comment section. Now, Zenge, what do you think about the trade-offs that exist with these political changes, as well as the expanding of the seats? I mean, on one hand, it's a good thing because now more women, more young people, people with disabilities have a voice. But at the same time, there is this concern by analysts that the increase in costs could actually undermine some of the changes that the government is trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's very concerning. I think everyone is looking at the delimitation report now. They're waiting for it. It's not yet out, the latest one. So everyone will keep their eyes on that. There's a lot of wariness and a lot of mistrust. But I think what people should really watch out for is the result of the delimitation report. That's going to tell us exactly whether or not the mistrust and fears that people have are actually going to come true. The Oasis Forum was once on the same side as the current president and the ruling party in opposing Bill 10 between 2019 and 2020. And now they seem to be very much at loggerheads. And it just shows you a lot about the politics and the different power changes of Zambia's history. As we obviously, we went into the constitutional reform process, the constitutional changes that Zambia's had. But I think more people should be keeping an eye on this, and more people should be engaged, because this is a direct relationship with you. I think a lot of people say, I don't care about politics, but politics will always care about you. I don't do politics. Politics will do you. So, in short, what I'm trying to say is that the shifts of power and the way power is decided and voted, in this case, the share of National Assembly seats, potential for gerrymandering, but then at the same time, the supposed inclusion could be a very big test for Zambia's democracy, or it could be a sort of road to increased progress by including more people and guaranteeing them seats. Rwanda has the largest female representation, but I think it's a mixed bag. It's a very, very mixed bag, and we have to sort of keep eyes on the delimitation report to see what boundaries look like. And then that's probably going to be our clearest way to tell whether or not this is indeed a power grab. Of course, there is the economic side of it, but I think everyone agrees with the inclusivity part. The concern is more so the other aspects.
Right. I think that's a sober way to end the video. For all of you who have been listening to this podcast, thank you very much for listening, as well as please leave a like, share, subscribe, and follow us on all platforms. See you guys on the next episode.
I am an African.